Okay, we're live, so watch what you say.
If you don't,
All right.
are you all right?
Well, good morning, everybody who braved the. It's like it's never that bad where it's like, oh, it's so, but it's enough of a pain in the butt to be like, all right. So we're looking at readings for next week, February 5th. So let's see, February 5th, and then we have February 5th and February what? That would be the 12th. Those are the last two normal Sundays of Epiphany, because the Sunday afterwards, the 19th, is the Transfiguration, which means Ash Wednesday is that Wednesday. So we're, 2.5, 3 weeks away, something like that, from Lent, which, that's fun. So, we've actually got the continuation of what we had last week with Matthew. We started with Matthew 5, got the Beatitudes, very beginning of the Sermon on the Mount. We get the continuation of that. And is really some good, it's good stuff. But it kind of works together with what we had last Sunday. So we might look at both of those together. It works. It actually it's fun that it does work in well with the epistle reading. This is the this is with Paul. I decided to know nothing among you except Christ and Him crucified. Good stuff. And then Isaiah is likewise good. So, what do you want to read? What do you want to look at? Doesn't matter.
Any ideas, people?
Isaiah, no.
Okay. Cool.
Okay, I'm going to do the gospel.
Okay.
Because it's shorter?
No, because I said Isaiah.
No, I just was reading out like it. Jesus said, "You are the salt of the earth, but if salt has lost its taste, how shall its saltiness be restored? It is no longer good for anything except to be thrown out and trampled under people's feet. You are the light of the world. A city set on a hill cannot be hidden, nor do people light a lamp and put it under a basket, but on a stand, and it gives light to all in the house. In the same way, let your light shine before others, so that they may see your good works and give glory to your Father who is in heaven. Do not think that I have come to abolish the law of the prophets. I have not come to abolish them, but to fulfill them. For truly I say to you, until heaven and earth pass away, not an iota, not a dot will pass from the law until all is accomplished. Therefore, whoever relaxes one of the least of these commandments and teaches others to do the same will be called least in the kingdom of heaven. But whoever does them and teaches them will be called great in the kingdom of heaven. For I tell you, unless your righteousness exceeds that of the scribes and Pharisees, you will never enter the kingdom of heaven."
All right. And I just popped on to our YouTube channel. Mary says hi, and that Lee is doing well. So they are with us virtually today. So, like we were talking about it a little bit last week, how the Sermon on the Mount is a fun sermon because it's a good example of you can read the Sermon on the Mount and read it as all law. Very easy to do, and there is a lot of law in there. You could read it and really only hear gospel, which you could do that too, except that it's not all gospel. But you can try to push it that way. You got to read it with both of these things together, okay? Because that's how God works. This is how He speaks: law and gospel working together. And you can really screw up with the with the Beatitudes and say, okay, blessed are the poor, blessed are the poor in spirit, blessed are the meek, and say, well, I have to be these things in order to be blessed. That is a law reading of that. Like, I need to mourn if I'm going to be blessed? How would people think this? Well, I mean, go to Martin Luther. What was he doing? He was trying to, he would beat himself. He would deprive himself because the only way to be blessed was to be grieved for his sin, and he was. And he was like, I need to get rid of my sin, so I need to, I need to make myself meek and humble, and I need to get there. And the only way is to beat it out of me because I can't get this sin out of me. So that was a very law interpretation of that kind of a thing. The gospel is, you are blessed in these things. Okay, that would be to elevate them to a kind of a virtue, I guess. And say like, okay, well, I'm blessed when I'm meek, so it's better to be meek, and I don't even know how it would even work, honestly. But just to look at it in terms of like, okay, something going on gospel-wise, or you are salt of the earth, what we have today. If it's lost its salt or lost its taste, how it shall be restored. So you need to be salt. Okay, that's law. You need to be salt. Okay, gospel is you are salt of the earth, and you're good just as you are. All right. Gospel would ignore the part with, careful, because if you lose your saltiness, you're good for nothing except for being trampled under people's feet. If you're just like, no, I'm good, I don't have to worry about anything. It's like, no, there's sin. there are things to be worried about. It's both working together. What we got going on in this is, I've always heard a lot of people trying to figure out what it means to be salt of the earth. And we go to salt as a flavor. It adds flavor to things. It brings out flavor in things. So salt gives texture, flavor, whatever. It is a preservative, so we preserve. So trying to understand, well, what does it mean to be salt in the earth? Yeah.
I did a paper on salt for Women's Club.
Oh, there we go.
All the trails heading west were where there were salt licks through Omaha and so forth.
Mm-hmm.
Salt is very essential
Yeah.
to life. So salt is a really key ingredient.
Right.
This is very important.
Which, yeah, absolutely. And then how does that then translate to us being salt? So we're saying we are essential. We are an essential ingredient to life. Well, what does that mean?
Well,
See, that's the tricky part. Where it's like, well,
your salt, you can't hold your water. You get dehydrated.
that's true.
if you don't have salt, then you don't
True.
have life, in a way.
Right.
So you are very important. You're a key ingredient to spreading the gospel.
That could work.
Okay.
I try to warn you if there's a trick question, and usually you can tell if I'm asking a question because I start getting excited, like ooh. I don't have a good poker face with that stuff. So no, I'm open to, whatever you might have to throw out there, because honestly, when it comes to that, it's interesting because okay, well, we can talk about what does it mean to be the salt of the earth and integral to this, necessary, absolutely all this stuff.
Salt used to be, not that long ago, more expensive than gold. It was worth more than gold.
Back in when it was
He's right, that's
Yeah.
where the word salary
1800s.
comes from. The soldiers, Roman
Right.
soldiers were paid in salt.
salt.
Yeah,
I was just
I'm
gonna
talking
say.
back in the 1800s.
Yeah, valuable is definitely a part of that.
Pure meat,
Yeah.
Fish.
But could,
fish, yeah.
verse 14, you are the light of the world, dovetail with the salt?
Oh sure. Oh yeah. This is all
Yes.
very well. This is all like you are this, you are this, you are this, and I think
And
finding
can't you
a-
just help the feeling of the God's, remember the song or the play Godspell?
never.
You are
Never.
the light of the- You don't know Godspell?
No.
Okay.
Hey, I'm a Southern California heathen. What can you do with me?
We didn't think you could go through the seminary without
You
seeing it.
guys know that song. What is it?
Oh, I flew so far under the radar at seminary. I just kept my head down. I didn't want to ruffle any feathers. I'm going to get in and get out.
Look it up now.
I will.
He can look. Yeah,
Well, I think you got to take them both together. So like this whole, this is who you are, and not focusing necessarily on so much like, well, what does this mean? So much as this is who you are. You are salt. You are light. So not necessarily like, well, what does it mean to be salt? And you know, I'm necessary. I'm important. I'm the light of the world. I think when we focus so much on like, oh, how is that going to be? Like, how do I shine my light? I think our tendency is to make it more about, well, then it's more about me. How am I doing this? Versus, and that's more of a law move there. Instead, maybe a more gospel move there to say, well, what is Jesus saying? He's saying you are salt, right? And you are light. Okay. Back up a little bit to the beginning of the Beatitudes. You know, he's saying, blessed are the meek, blessed are the poor in spirit. He's basically saying, like, okay, here are people who society in general, the world, looks upon them and says, you have nothing. You're the lowest of the low. You are meek. You're not strong. You are poor. You have nothing.
Your salt.
What's that? You're not
worth.
You're not worth your salt. Exactly. You're mourning, so you've lost what is precious to you. You are persecuted. You are oppressed. You know. So all these things that the world says, this is nothing. This is lowliness. And Jesus just comes and says, no, you're salt. You're necessary. You're required. You're whatever. You are the light of the world. And the city set on the hill cannot be hidden. So he's saying, like, you can't hide a city on the hill. Kind of like losing your saltiness. It's like, I don't know how you lose your saltiness if you're salt. But I think that's the point. He's saying, like, look, this is just who you are. You know, this is who you are in me. You know, I don't care what the world says about you. Don't worry about that. They say you're meek, you're nothing. No, you are light. You are salt. You bring flavor. You bring preservation. You bring a necessary thing. You are light. You shine a light into things. Mary comments that we bring Christ. Absolutely. And this is more along the lines of how we do these things, is that we point to Christ. Yeah, we share the gospel, pointing to Christ in all things. We don't point to ourselves. Because if we point to ourselves, what are we pointing to? Somebody who's meek, who's mourning, who's nothing. And so it is really just this whole turning things around and saying, looking at things in terms of this is who we are in Jesus Christ. So I beat on this a lot in sermons where it's like, you know, I don't always feel forgiven. I don't always feel, you know, God says I'm forgiven and I'm loved and I'm holy. And it's like, on some of my best days, I feel maybe one of those. And that's just like a little bit. I rarely ever feel like all the stuff God says about me. No. In fact, when I do my prayer before the sermon, it's, I should mic it up one time. You'd probably laugh. Because it is literally just me saying, I don't know why you picked me, God. I should not be here doing this. I'm not worthy of doing this. I don't know why these good people, you've brought me to them, but I have not been a good Christian. I have not been a good person. I've not been, you know, it's basically a confession kind of thing. And it's like, I have no idea what you were thinking putting me in here. But Lord, let your word be the one that goes out here. Let this not be about me. Like my stories that are whatever a part of this, may it only serve your word. Like, let it not be about me, because I don't have any business being near a pulpit. And that's kind of the, what's that?
I don't know about that. You are the salt of the earth.
Well, only because God has made me
That's
that.
what he's talking about. He's
Yeah.
a good person. But if you sin, you lost your salt, your taste. How do you restore it?
Well, yeah. How
I mean,
do
that's
you
what I
restore it?
get
You
out
can't,
of it.
right? It would be
Pardon?
impossible for you to restore it, right? But
Yeah,
who can
well,
who can do it?
You could ask for forgiveness.
You can ask for
Maybe
forgiveness.
your saltiness will come back, and then
God restores you, right?
You can come back, yeah.
Yeah.
But you are salt of the earth, so you don't have to.
There, you get it.
That's why you're here.
It's
Teach people like me.
the blind leading the blind. But yeah, it's all about what God makes us.
Right.
And so this is why, you know, it's like, yeah, you are, and you can't help it. And this is the beautiful part of it, is like, because when you go down this road of like, well, how do I, you know, how if I lose my saltiness, how can I become salty again? You know, I'm the light of the world, so how can I make sure my light is shining? And he says, like, a city on a hill can't be hidden. Like, I am shining through you. The light that you're shining is because of me. You can't hide that, okay? People don't put light and put it under a basket, but on a stand, it gives light to the whole house. So he says, let your light shine before others. Let me shine before others. Let people see me through you. Don't worry about, what you're doing for me. Which actually kind of leads with the sermon that I'm preaching today. Whatever.
And I take that verse, let your light shine before others, to mean go forth and proclaim
Sure.
the word.
Well, not just proclaim the word, but he says so that they may see your good works. Right? Other than proclaiming the word, I mean, the best way for somebody to see your faith is to see what it looks like in action. There's nothing wrong with that. And really, it's both things. Well, kind of coming back to this, is both things together. Gospel is kind of, we shorthand this with like, this is the word, right? The word that comes to us that says forgiveness, yay. The law is, what we do. If you have a sharp line between these two, it just doesn't quite work. If you say, if you go out to people and you're going to proclaim the word, but you're not going to show them what this word does, then they're going to be like, well, what's the point? I mean, you're just telling me. It's basically that, well, you're telling me to do this, but I can see clearly you don't even believe this because I can see what you're doing. You're a hypocrite. You're proclaiming this, but you're not living it. That's all they see, right? So they won't listen to it. Whereas if you only focus on that, they're going to say, wow, you do nice things. But they're not going to know why. Anybody can do nice things. Anybody can do good, according to the world. It has no connection with God. So it's like, okay, well, you're just a nice person. All right. But when you put these two together, this is when this is how it works. Because we say, here's the word that forgives. You don't need to do anything for your salvation. He loves you. He forgives you. Great. And because of that, this is what it leads to. This is what it remakes me into. This makes you salt and light. And this is what it looks like. So now when you bring both of those together, then people say, oh, so this is what you're saying. And wow, I can actually see it. Because we live by, well, where am I writing? So here's believers and non-believers. All right. Do these live by faith or by sight? Sight. What are we supposed to live by? Faith or by sight? Sight. Faith, yeah. So we want to proclaim the word. We want to proclaim to people, share the gospel. Well, how are they going to hear and receive the gospel? You can only receive the gospel through what? Faith, right? Well, faith comes by hearing by the word of God. So they need the word, yes. But by default, they're only living by sight because they don't have faith. So if they're going to give you a hearing, if a non-believer is going to give you the time to say, okay, tell me about your God. Tell me about this Jesus guy. Well, you got to appeal. You got to say, well, let me show you. Let me show you what this looks like in my life, and I'll tell you about it. Okay? Because all they're going to know initially is by what they see. And then you can share this word, which then the word works faith, and they become people who live by faith. So it's both of these things together. So that's why, in the gospel it says, like, yes, you are salt. This is who you are. I make you salt. You are light. I make you light. Yes, you can't hide this. He says, so let your light shine so that they may see your good works. And what do they? So they see your good works, and then what do?
Give glory.
Give glory to your Father in heaven. So there is this nice little progression here of works that actually kind of helps and works together with our proclamation. It's funny because that seemed, well, if I go back 10 years, just getting to the seminary, I would think I'd be run out of the synod for saying something like that, because we can't talk about works at all, and works don't come into the equation, and we're saved by grace alone, and that's it. And we're still saved by grace alone. But there is a place for what we do. It's important. You know, we should live according to this word. Not because it earns us anything, but because that's what salt does. I mean, it's like, okay, so you're all, Marilyn, yes, before I,
The last thing he says
yes.
can sound to works righteousness people like he's condemning them.
Are you talking about verse 20?
Where he says, unless you do
Oh,
this complete.
Okay, yeah, hold on to that. We're getting there. Yes.
Well, it's a riddle, because, and he's not condemning them, because he is the full gospel and the full law, and if you have him, you've done that.
Yeah.
And he's standing right among them.
Yes.
So he's just waiting for them to see it, and some in the crowd are going, ah,
They're getting it.
I
They're
follow you.
getting there, yeah.
I got it.
Right.
And otherwise, there's no hope for anybody to fulfill the whole law. Nobody goes to heaven but Jesus.
Well, yeah, if it was according to the law, yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Yes.
But he's not condemning them that way, because he's their salvation.
Yes.
Standing there right
Absolutely.
in front of them.
Absolutely.
He's having the best time of his life, right there.
Having to deal with us, well, you know.
Revealing
But yeah.
himself to us. And
Right,
it
right.
is sweet. He's the door to heaven, and it's open.
Yes.
Hallelujah. He's-
So yeah, hold on to that one for 1 second. So backing up to what we were saying about there's a place for this, and why we say, you know, works are just kind of an important part of who we are, because they flow from our faith. They're just a natural occurrence of that. You know, it's like he says you're all salt. Well, what do you say if you're talking to salt? Imagine you're talking to salt. Do you say, okay, salt, be salty? No, why? It is, yeah. It already is salty. You wouldn't tell salt to be salty. It is salty. It's just what salt is. So in the same way, he's saying, be light. You know, so it's not like, okay, well, how do I? It's like, no, you are light. See, this is what you are now. You're just light. So he says, be light. Let your good work shine. That's how we do it. And glorifying God all the while. And then he moves into this whole thing in verse 17 and on about the law and the prophets. And he says, you know, I have not come to abolish the law, but to fulfill them. Okay, so that's good. He fulfills the law and the prophets. The law will not pass away until all is accomplished. So the law bears down on all of us and is in force and is important. And then he closes with this little bit about, for I tell you, unless your righteousness exceeds that of the scribes and the Pharisees, you will never enter the kingdom of heaven. So that could freak people out. It probably did freak them out. Because, yes, Mary comments, we don't will to salt to be salty, it just is. You got it.
I'm sorry, what did she say?
She says, we don't will salt to be salty, it just is. So yeah, the scribes and the Pharisees, and I think I've mentioned this before, you know, they're not, for us, they're the bad guys, you know, Pharisees. You know, the Pharisees are the ones who plotted against Jesus. It's like, yeah, some of them, not all of them. A lot of Pharisees loved Jesus. Nicodemus, absolutely. He was a Pharisee.
He was a good guy.
Yeah. Not all the Pharisees were not a monolithic group. You know, there was diversity amongst them. The scribes and the Pharisees, some of them liked Jesus, some of them probably didn't have an opinion, some of them felt very strongly against him. The Pharisees were the people, and we often think like, okay, well, the Pharisees were the ones who made the law a burden on the people. They were the ones, you know, trying to maintain power. It's like, some of them, sure, but Pharisees were like pastors back then. There were good ones and there were bad ones. There were ones that were all about themselves, and there were ones who were actually trying to get people to come closer to God. They were often held in high esteem. You know, they were like, okay, well, they've devoted their lives to, you know, their craft of bringing God's word and understanding it. So these are they were actually looked highly upon. If you wanted your daughter to marry a Pharisee, yeah, good guys. So it wasn't like some kind of always just this bad kind of thing, but they were held up as kind of this. They were the ideal, as far as if you wanted to be a good believer, the Pharisee was your go-to.
What happened to him?
What happened to him?
Yeah, how come we don't hear about him other than?
Just because it's you've got the teachers and rabbis. Now the Pharisees, the scribes, the Sadducees. Well, the Sadducees were more of a cultural little group amongst them. So it's just once Jerusalem falls, the temple comes down. It's like why they don't have priests because there's no temple to serve in. The Jewish faith, there's no more priesthood because you need the temple for the priest to serve in. So you just don't have them anymore. It's just that whole kind of system sort of fell apart once they're all.
Went into something else.
I
never understood what happened to him.
So in the same way, when he says, "For your righteousness to exceed that," the people would hear that and be like, "Wow, how am I going to be better than these Pharisees? How is my righteousness going to exceed them? Because if I want to enter the kingdom of heaven, my righteousness has to exceed theirs." And it's fun because
Was that a big test?
was that a big test?
Task.
Oh, task.
Yes.
What, to have your righteousness exceed?
To have your righteousness.
Oh, yeah. It works in two ways. First, it works as law, because he's absolutely right. Your righteousness has to exceed theirs. Now that even works on a couple ways, because you can say, well, there's the Pharisees who are like real scumbags, and you say, well, you're saying like your righteousness has to exceed theirs. Like, well, that's not too hard.
He's just saying you can't do this without me.
Ultimately, yeah. Because most of the reaction would be like, wow, I have to be better than these pastors who are really awesome. I have to be better than these really awesome guys. And it goes even better than that. You have to have perfect righteousness. Your righteousness has to be perfect before God if you want to enter the kingdom of heaven. The gospel part of that is like, well, Christ is your righteousness. Christ is the only one who fulfills this. The only one whose righteousness exceeds and raises to the level of God is Jesus. So he becomes your righteousness. Therefore, in him, your righteousness does exceed theirs, and you do enter the kingdom of heaven. So law and gospel working together. The law there tears you down and says you can't do this. So the people would hear that and be like, wow, how is this going to happen then? How can I do this? And the gospel is, you can. I do it for you. I am your righteousness, just like Marilyn was saying. So yeah, it's great stuff. You just gotta, you can't go on one side or the other. You gotta have both of them together. Anyway, comments or thoughts? Kind of. We'll give Mary a couple minutes to comment here. No pressure. You don't need to comment. It's fine. All right. Then we can move over. Let's see. I don't know if you want to look at the epistle. Haven't done that. Anybody want to read 1 Corinthians, what is it? 2, 1 through 16?
And I, when I came to you, brothers, did not come proclaiming to you the testimony of God with lofty speech or wisdom. For I decided to know nothing among you except Jesus Christ and him crucified. And I was with you in weakness and in fear and much trembling. And my speech and my message were not in plausible words of wisdom, but in demonstration of the Spirit and of power, that your faith might not rest in the wisdom of men, but in the power of God. Yet among the mature we do impart wisdom, although it is not a wisdom of this age or of the rulers of this age who are doomed to pass away. But we impart a secret and hidden wisdom of God, which God decreed before the ages for our glory. None of the rulers of this age understood this, for if they had, they would not have crucified the Lord of glory. But as it is written, what no eye has seen, nor ear heard, nor the heart of man imagined, what God has prepared for those who love him. These things God has revealed to us through the Spirit. For the Spirit searches everything, even the depths of God. For who knows a person's thoughts except the spirit of that person which is in him? So also no one comprehends the thoughts of God except the Spirit of God. Now we have received not the spirit of the world, but the Spirit who is from God, that we might understand the things freely given us by God. And we impart this in words not taught by human wisdom, but taught by the Spirit, interpreting spiritual truths to those who are spiritual. The natural person does not accept the things of the Spirit of God, for they are folly to him, and he is not able to understand them because they are spiritually discerned. The spiritual person judges all things, but is himself to be judged by no one. For who has understood the mind of the Lord so as to instruct him? We have the mind of Christ. I like verse 14.
Which verse? 14. The natural person does not accept the things of the Spirit of God, for they are folly to him, and he is not able to understand them because they are spiritually discerned.
I have a lot of friends like that.
Yeah?
They're spiritual, they'll say, but they don't believe in Jesus per se.
Right. Well, I mean, that goes exactly what we were saying before, is that if you're a non-believer, I mean, you can only go by, you don't have that faith that you can discern those things. It's spiritual. Yeah, I'm spiritual, but I'm not religious. That's a big one, which is funny because
That's the other spirit. The Holy Spirit and the other one.
everybody's religious. Everybody has religion, something you believe in. Atheists have religion. It's their religion. It's the self, but it's all religion. We're going to talk about in the sermon today. I lean into a little bit on the whole personal relationship with Jesus thing that you don't hear about it as much anymore. People don't really hammer it. It was a while back where it was like, well, you have to have a personal relationship with Jesus. And the fun thing about that is like everyone has a personal relationship with Jesus. Even an unbeliever has a personal relationship with Jesus. It's just not a good relationship. It is a relationship of judge and judged. I mean, it's not good. But everybody has a personal relationship with Jesus. Everybody has religion. Everybody's spiritual. It's this weird kind of like trying to drive wedges in between these things. Like, no. It's just your religion is either true or not. So you have a lot of spiritual friends, I'm sure. We all do. Everybody's spiritual. But it's just what is that spirituality vested in? What is that religion based in? What is that relationship like? And the kicker is just that apart from the Spirit of God, they're not going to get it. It's just one of the most frustrating things about evangelism is that you're not guaranteed, that it's going to quote unquote work. When you go out and share the gospel, I can tell you, all of you, like, I want you this week, 5 people, Monday, Tuesday, every day during the weekdays, share the gospel with somebody. Like, well, were you successful? Did you share the word? Yes? Okay, good to go.
Isn't there a verse that says, "My word will not come back empty," or
Yeah,
how it goes?
right. Yeah, it does. But that's not to say that that's to say that it will do what God intends it to do. So if God intends for somebody to receive that and come to faith, then that's what's going to happen. If God intends for somebody to receive it and it does not take root, then it still falls within that scripture. Kind of like the parable of the sower, where he just takes a seed and he's like, whee! He throws a seed up everywhere. And some of it goes in good ground, some of it goes in bad ground, rocky, thorny, whatever. And they say the whole point is like, the gospel goes out, the word goes out. Your job is not to be like, well, I'm going to plant it here, but not here. Your job is to take it and just go, wee. You're supposed to be the stupid sower. Is really what the parable is. It's not. Was the parable of the good seed? I think is what it's usually referred to. It's the parable of the dumb sower, because only an idiot would sow seed like that. It's like giving seed to like a 2-year-old and say, go plant a garden. They go, ooh, and they're gonna put it over here, and then it's like, oh God, why did you put it there? That's how how that parable kind of works. It's like you don't worry about it because God does all the work. And then same thing is going on here. What Paul is saying is like, look, the Spirit is the one who brings discernment. And he's talking to the Corinthians in 1 Corinthians. These are people who have really lost their way in a lot of aspects, and are focusing on themselves very heavily, and puffing themselves up. Pride is an issue, and it begins with, oh, well, I follow Apollos. I follow. It's like, oh, I follow Christ. Ooh, I'm better than you because I follow Jesus. Like, I think you're missing the point there. That's like saying, oh, I'm more humble than you are. I don't think you get humility, but that's another story. So these people are just kind of completely off this. He's like, look, you're focusing on your own wisdom. And even before this, he says, look, some of you, before Christ, you weren't the brightest. You weren't the best. In fact, God chose you guys because you were idiots, because you were low, because you were dumb, because you were not special according to the world, which is, I said last week, the best backhanded compliment they could receive. But he says, look, God picked you because you weren't the best to show his power, that he works through even idiots like you guys. He works through means that the world would say, what is this all about? So he says that, the natural person does not accept the things of the Spirit because they're folly. I mean, I've always kind of waffled on this one. Like, invite somebody to church. Like, well, yeah, of course, you should bring them to church. There's good stuff to be received. But if they have like no grounding in it, if they don't really, if they are completely unaware of all this stuff and they come in here, it's like, well, what do you expect from them? From the get-go. Now, they receive the word, and if it clicks right then and there, that was God's will, awesome. So that's a case for, yes, bring them in. But you can't expect it just to be like a turnkey sort of thing. Like, oh, because they're not spiritually discerned. It's just like if somebody opens up a Bible, an atheist opens up a Bible and reads, the Spirit is not in them to bring that word, right?
Well, isn't that what this one paragraph is saying? No eye has seen, ear heard, heart of man imagined what God has prepared for those who love him. That's kind of basically what you're referring to.
And so that's why, I prefer to go along the lines of, have a relationship with that person. Kind of going back to the gospel, let them see the light shining through you so that they might see, planting those seeds with the word and our works. So that way they see what it is going on here. To see what does this look like, that it is not just they're not just coming in being like, okay, I've weighed the evidence and I've decided this Jesus guy sounds pretty good. It's like, it's not that. It's not just, it is the Spirit working through it. It is more than that. They can see how this has made you a new creation. And really that is the Spirit's work through you and the Spirit's work through them. So it's just the whole attitude or idea that our people won't be converted to Christ because of us. You're not going to argue somebody. So like your spiritual friends, and you think like, well, if I only had the right argument, the right proof to show them why this is true, it's like, I'd pray for them. I would share the gospel whenever possible, whenever it's prudent, whenever there's a really good opening, and not just like, hey, here's a moment, let me tell you about Jesus. Like, maybe, maybe like in a moment of need, you know, and they're being attacked spiritually, then you can go and be like, hey, let me sit with you in this, and let me, you know, share some words of consolation and peace. You know, those are the kinds of ways, because that's the Spirit working through that, and not you saying, well, I'm going to get this person to acknowledge Jesus. It's always the Spirit working through the Word, through you, through this, that, the other. The Spirit doing all the work. And that's what Paul is pointing to here. Anyway, sorry, kind of rambled a little bit there. Any thoughts or comments? I got to wrap up a little bit earlier than usual because I messed up the computer earlier this week, so I just need to retweak a couple things before we stream. I was trying to fix, but all right, all sound good? All right.
Session.
Cool. Well, thank you. Jesus, our example works. Yes. Yeah. Absolutely. Mary's good. She's tracking. Awesome. All right. Well, thank you all, and thank you everybody online. And we'll be back in 15 minutes for service.
Isn't that where